Third-party cookies means your information can and likely will be shared with other websites. This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. Tonight, we're talking about cookies. Not this kind, but the digital ones, and how much those crumbs you leave across websites are actually worth. Don't be embarrassed if you don't exactly understand them. Most of us have blindly accepted cookies when browsing a site. It's basically the same lie we tell ourselves about agreeing to the terms of service. Yeah, we totally read that agreement all the way through. But tonight, we're gonna help you make sense of what exactly you're accepting when you accept digital tracking. To put it simply, online cookies are stored fragments of user data, which are then used to customize your browsing experience and tailor it specifically for you. If it's a first-party cookie, that means those little crumbs are stored on the website you're currently on. Third-party cookies means your information can and likely will be shared with other websites. So if a clothing website knows you're looking for shoes on their site and you allowed third-party cookies, it means you'll probably be getting a lot more shoe ads browsing on other websites. Man, those always reel me back in. Some internet browsers like Safari and Firefox moved to block third-party tracking cookies to give users a little privacy back. But Google's Chrome browser, which is the most widely used, has not. Google did announce plans to block cookies altogether, but it's already been delayed to 2023, nearly a year later than originally expected. Google blames regulatory complaints on the holdup, but it might also just be that cash money. Chrome also has more than 65% of the world's online advertising market. Though it's worth noting, before the cookies crumble, Google is already testing another similar tool to replace them. This one has been named the Federated Learning of Cohorts, or FLoC. It is supposed to better protect people's privacy by allowing advertisers to target users with similar interests rather than individuals. It's no surprise Google is trying to come up with another option to help generate that ad revenue. Last year, the global online ad industry surpassed $378 billion. By 2024, it's expected to be worth $645 billion. And it's pretty concentrated. According to eMarketer, Google, Facebook, and Amazon combined to make up more than 2/3 of total digital ad revenue share. Since it's clear there's a ton of money in the industry, user data has some serious value. But how do companies buy and sell that information? There's a whole industry called data brokers. Think of them like Harry Potter and his invisibility cloak. They can virtually go anywhere and are pretty much undetected.
My body's gone.
They collect facts about users that could be helpful in marketing specific items, but that information could also be shared for other purposes since this industry is largely unregulated. They can learn your income, gender, how old you are, home address, when you got married or if things didn't work out, when you got a divorce, how many children you have, and even their ages. The thing is, we can't blame all of this on the internet. This industry was around before then, and companies can collect things from public records. But since coming online, data brokers have been able to put their hands on even more information, like your current location. To bring it back to the cookies, if you spend a lot of time surfing, shopping, taking quizzes, or even liking certain social media posts, data brokers could also learn new things about you. Even your food orders are fair game. Say you swipe up on an influencer's story, which links the outfit they're wearing. Next thing you know, you're getting ads catered to you about those items of clothing, or maybe even items from that brand. But who's getting the money for your information? The apps or websites that you visit are getting a cut of it, but data brokers get most of it, and it is a lot. The data broker industry is believed to be worth about $200 billion. Seems like a gross invasion of privacy, right? But the law is slowly catching up. Anyone in Europe can request access to obtain or delete their data under the General Data Protection Regulation rules. In the US, California requires data brokers to register with the state's attorney general. On the federal level, lawmakers are considering the Data Broker List Act, which would create a national registry overseen by the Federal Trade Commission. I'm an extremely online person, which means I create lots of data. I'm just glad my desktop isn't giving me a readout on how much time I've spent on certain platforms, you know? But as people increasingly live their lives online, law enforcement agencies are finding value in the data we create for their own investigations. Newsy's Tyler Atkinson explains.
U.S. law enforcement agencies are increasingly turning to big tech companies to obtain people's phone calls, emails, and even shopping histories for ongoing investigations. In the first half of 2020, the latest data set available, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, and Apple received more than 114,000 data requests from U.S. law enforcement agencies and supplied data in roughly 85% of those cases. Companies are legally required to respond to these requests, which have tripled in the U.S. since 2015.
People are living their entire lives online. And now with the law enforcement element, it's become very easy for government agencies and law enforcement agencies to access that information.
Effectively, if a company stores your data, police can likely get a hold of it with court orders, subpoenas, or warrants, all without physically accessing your devices, and potentially without your knowledge. They can also buy data about you from brokers.
If the police want to search my cell phone or my laptop or computer, whatever like that, warrant has to be issued to me. They have to state with particularly what they want to do. When they're going to Google, when they're going to Alphabet or whoever like that, and they want to find information about me, it's indirect. Technically, my rights are not being violated on one level.
In some cases, companies can deny data access, like if the request is too broad. But it's often difficult for companies to know when a request may go too far.
They may get a phone number and request for information attached to that number without even knowing the name of the individual. And so it's hard for them to push back under those circumstances because the vagueness favors government agencies. If the government is requesting something.
Experts told Newsy that one of the most troubling aspects of this process is that investigators can seek out gag orders to prevent big tech companies from notifying people when their data was given to law enforcement. For instance, in June, Newsy first learned that the Trump administration's Department of Justice asked Apple in 2018 to turn over data on congressional staff members, their families, and even House Intelligence Committee member Adam Schiff, as part of an investigation into leaks. The gag order was renewed twice, so those affected only found out about this in 2021. Experts also told Newsy the routine turnover of data puts big tech companies in an uncomfortable position with their customers, especially so for Apple, who advertises their user privacy protections.
They can assure you and say, on one level, your conversations are private, but they're also not saying we're not going to sell your data, we're not going to sell information to others, and they can't promise and say that we're going to go to jail to protect your privacy.
Tyler Atkinson, Newsy, Chicago.
So now we know more about law enforcement requests going up, but there's another group of people trying to get their hands on your data who aren't going about it using legal avenues. Here to talk to us more about that is Newsy's Tyler Atkinson. Tyler, we're both very online people, and I feel like I have lots of data that could be taken. How can the information that data brokers collect be valuable to cyber criminals?
Where should we start? Do we want to work with personal identifying information, or do we just want to talk about passwords? If you go onto certain cyber criminal forums, a lot of times they will just have posted in there huge reams of data that they've been able to collect from, say it be, just various types of businesses. All sorts of industries collect data all over the place. And effectively, let's say you have a profile with a healthcare provider, or maybe even an automotive store or something like that. All these different places that you put your digital data into, all these businesses become repositories for all of that data. And if it's not really secure, you could end up giving up things that may be able to not only identify you on other sites, but give you access into those other places. Like, for instance, in the Colonial Pipeline attack, we know that the hackers that were able to get in there had purchased a set of passwords that another cybercrime group had gotten from a bunch of different businesses and put together. And from there, they are able to find a password of an ex-employee in order to get into the actual VPN for the company, and then they jump down the line. So, it's not just a matter of them being able to get a hold of your name or photos or things like that. In certain cases, they can get your passwords together, and just like real data brokers, they can put all that information together and effectively give themselves some kind of profile to be able to get into the different places where your data exists all over the place. Now, you can avoid that by changing up your passwords on every website that you use and having general good cyber hygiene, but how many of us have clicked the do not update thing in the corner when it pops up on our screens? A lot of times what they're ending up doing is just getting data that is not always necessarily, locked up even by our own choice, and basically using it in order to socially engineer their way into different kinds of user access portals.
You mentioning do not update, continuing to kind of click that or putting off whatever updates is really hitting home for me because I feel like I'm one of those people that they could probably use a primer on how best to protect myself, which is kind of leading into my next question. It's kind of unnerving considering all the little data points that businesses have collected. And I feel a little vulnerable, partly because there aren't many rules on making sure you can avoid having your data taken in the first place. So as an average person, I am an average person. What can we do to really make sure our data is secure while continuing to use these services?
Yeah, because you don't really want to stop using Google. I mean, it's a tremendous free service, but it does come at
No, I don't want to move on to any other browser,
I mean, so the first part obviously is people having good cyber hygiene. That does end up helping at a certain point. But I think another thing that's important to realize is just as these companies can go with your permission a lot of the times, collect your data from the various websites you scrape and whatnot, you can ask these companies in turn to delete your data at a certain point. Now, in the United States, the ways that you can go about doing that are largely constrained to how state governments are handling your data. Right now there is no national privacy law in the United States, but there are about 5 or 6 states that have different kinds of laws set up in order for you to be able to better manage your data at a certain point. For instance, California, within that state, you can request companies turn over the data that they've collected on you so you can get a better sense of what's in there. I think the main thing really that people should kind of keep their eyes on, though, is just whenever you're going through different websites and going through different places where you have different where you have different profiles set up, you really do need to differentiate the passwords and the things that you are using across all of those different services at a certain point. I know that it's kind of a pain to keep 12 or 13 different passwords for the 13 different websites you own, but in a lot of cases we see that if you use one password across a bunch of other websites, your data could end up being out there at a certain point.
Once this has been published, I'm going to go back and watch it again and again and again because Tyler Atkinson is here dropping gems on how to be a better online person. Tyler, thank you so much for your expertise, man.
Hey, thank you. And if it's of any condolence, I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. It's something that we're all learning every single day as we move into a digital society. It's just important to note that, we generate more data than ever. There's more opportunities for people to get a hold of that data than ever. We just need to be mindful of it.
Be mindful, folks. That is extremely comforting. Thanks again, Tyler.
Thank you.
When you're back, we'll tell you how residents in cities across the country are feeling when it comes to proof of vaccination.